On the Radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
Welcome to On the Radar. I'm meteorologist Ross Whitley with the CBS 17 Storm Team, and today we're talking about the introduction to our newest meteorologist. I know I haven't been here all that long, but we have another one that has just recently joined the team. My counterpart on the weekend, Matthew Huddleston. He will be doing the mornings for the weekend, as well as filling in for other roles as we go throughout the week. He'll also eventually be on here with me, probably hosting, working alongside, and doing other things as well. So you'll see a lot of his work going on in the background, just as you'll see my work going on in the background. And today you're going to see a little bit of everybody. Rachel's got an interview with Philip Dorr on bird migration, which we are currently under the peak migration across the East Coast, and we're quickly headed toward the fall season, really cooling down, and eventually it won't be that long before we are talking about the holidays and winter. And maybe if we're lucky this year, we'll get a nice healthy dose of winter weather, because I am certainly a winter weather fan. As if you've been watching On the Radar, you've already seen me highlighting the potential for winter weather and the kind of setups that we need to see there. So this year we'll see how things play out. But we've got bird migration. We're going to look back at Hurricane Hazel, which happened not too long ago, back in the 1950s. We'll talk about that briefly. We're also going to talk about some state fair stuff, because we have the state fair ongoing currently, so we've got some fun facts with that. But first, let's look at the current bird migration out there and show you what is going on. As of October 16th, a large majority of the birds are on the East Coast, and you can see that here from Birdcast. And our very own Rachel Dunsing interviewed Philip Dorr, and we're going to lead off with that. He's going to be talking about all the things you need to know about bird migration.
So you know what you're talking about when it comes to bird migration and all that. So let's go ahead and start there. It's fall, which means we're really getting into fall bird migration. So tell us a little bit about that in North Carolina.
Okay, well, this time of year, the birds are, at this point in time, right about in the middle of some of the most intense bird migration movements. The billions of birds every fall move from northern climates, northern states, the Canadian provinces, and they head south. They're heading south because the time of the year when there's lots of food and resources available in the north are gone. A lot of the insects that these birds depend upon for themselves and to feed and raise their young are disappearing, and it's going to get cold. So they have evolved to leave and to fly south. And what they're doing, of course, they're looking for places that are more amenable, that they have been going to for millennia in most cases. In the South, in South America, in Central America, and sometimes in the South coastal areas, the Caribbean and so forth in the United States. And in fact, we get some birds that migrate from the far north, especially a lot of sparrows that are getting here. Just the last few days, they started arriving here because they think this is south, because at this time of the day or time of the year, things begin to brown up, but there are still lots and lots of seeds and some remnant insects. But the main flux of birds, there are in the neighborhood of 4 billion birds that fly through North America, heading south to find more amenable climates to spend the winter in. And that's what's going on right now. They're all on their way, and we're right in the middle of that now.
So what are some things that we can do to help make sure these birds migrate to where they're supposed to go safely? We always hear a lot about lights out and turning your lights out this time of year. So explain a little bit more about that and other things we can do to help.
Okay, well, it's pretty easy to help these guys. By and large, the birds, most of the small birds migrate at night, and that's why lights are relevant to this whole issue. They migrate at night because there are fewer weather disturbances. The weather tends to calm down at night, so the small birds mostly don't need to fight weather phenomena to try to fly through storms. When they do hit storms, they typically go to the ground and wait those things out. But because birds have evolved to fly at night, they rely on not only that calmer weather, but they also rely on using natural light like stars and moonlight to navigate. And consequently, when birds experience or are exposed to all the increasing amounts of light that happens because of urbanization and human activity, they tend to get confused by that, and in fact are somewhat drawn to those lights, and sometimes then that causes real problems. They run into buildings, and they are likely to be actually drawn off their normal course by the big lights that are associated with cities and large towns and urban areas. And so many of our buildings nowadays are made of glass. Glass is a cheap material to make. It's attractive for use in architecture and so forth, but it's a real death trap for small birds who don't understand that the reflection that they see in that now window, they don't understand it. The reflection just looks like more habitat, so they crash right into it, and that's a problem. But it's easy enough to resolve a part of that issue, certainly. And those of us involved in birds and bird conservation have developed recommendations that encourage people from about 11 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning, which is when these birds are going to settle down. They're done flying for the night. And just before sunrise, they settle down. And because they're going to spend the day feeding. So it's easy enough. It's a simple thing to do. We can turn our lights down or off, in fact, or have down shading, lighting, and so forth. And that makes a real big difference to these little guys.
Yeah, and I know people like to have lights on outside their homes for not just aesthetic reasons, but also security reasons. And so I think you bringing up the lights turning downward, that's a good solution for people who may want to at least have some sort of light on for whatever reason, especially if it does make them feel safe. But I've also seen, especially at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in downtown Raleigh, they have what looks like little stickers on their glass bridge. So can you tell us a little bit more about that being an option for some of these birds?
Okay, yes, there are adaptations, patterns that can be put onto glass that the birds can see. And in fact, we don't see that very well, but the birds see these things. There are patterns of dots that can be put on, applied to windows, or nowadays some actual glass is being made for high building construction that contains this dotted material that the birds see, but we don't. And consequently, it doesn't affect our perception of the windows and the light that's coming and going, but the birds see it. So that's something we can do. The other thing is that relative to lights, if we have activity sensors on light so that they come on when somebody's present or when something is present in an area, that can provide or assist in the safety issues that folks might be concerned about.
So you mentioned it a little bit, but talk a little bit more about some of the birds that maybe we're going to be seeing fly overhead. You mentioned billions of birds. I guess what kind of birds could we expect to see here flying overhead of us here in North Carolina?
Okay, if we could really see them, if we could elevate ourselves to about 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet elevation above the ground so that we could have birds flying around us, a lot of what we would see at this time of year are little tiny warblers. And some little tiny brightly colored warblers are much in move these days. And in addition, there are things like robins and thrushes are on the move a lot right now. We've got kinglets on the move. So there are a lot of, let's see what else, orioles are on the move. So there's a lot of these small birds that really do need to move at night so that they can avoid the predators and the nasty weather that's out there.
And I always like to say this because, sometimes we just tend to think about ourselves or what we're doing. So why should people do this to protect the birds, to try and make sure the birds are safe as they make their pilgrimage south, so to speak?
Okay, well, it's a really, really good question. Good thoughts. Birds are really, really important of our overall environment. They add so much diversity and enjoyment and color and activity and interest to all of us, all of the kinds of things that people do outdoors. So they're around us most of the time, but it's really, really important that we help contribute to their survival, because many of these birds are important for not just recreational point of view, from the point that people like to go watch birds, do what we call birding, and watch birds, what they do, what their behavior is all about, and how they're interacting with other organisms. But these guys also, in many cases, provide a lot of what we call ecological services. They eat enormous quantities of insects in a year. And a lot of those insects are things that are pests on some of the plants and trees and so forth that we value, and that are also a part of our environment and our communities and the forests that we enjoy.
Yeah, definitely a big part of our ecosystem, even though they are, kind of small birds. The small things make a big difference as well.
Yes, they do. A whole lot of diets there, a whole lot of gullets to fill. With lots and lots of insects. And so, which is one of the things that it's also important to keep in mind, that birds, so many species of birds do depend on small insects for their food and also to feed their young. And insects have been struggling. In fact, there is around us, some scientists have been documenting. Not only have we seen major declines in bird population sizes over the last 50 years, but we've also now are seeing major declines in insect populations. And the birds depend upon those. And lots of other organisms depend on those insects as well. So the flush of greenery that we have in the spring that supports all of our insects supports our birds and lots of other organisms as well.
Wow, very interesting things there. I think we are just about through, but is there anything else that you want to add, that you want people to know about bird migration, how we can help them, turning out the lights, anything that you want to share?
Well, the main thing for me is we can turn out those lights. It's simple. Not only does it help the birds, we can save a few pennies here and there too, because we can reduce our electric bill a little bit. And that's one of the things. But to me, it's important there is a way for the average person to, as I think you're probably aware, to check on what's going on with the birds. There's the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology has a website that's called birdcast.info, that provides real-time pictures of all the flights of birds, because they use the dual Doppler radar, just like you weather people do. The ornithologists use that to be able to not only predict, but to observe and record what birds are moving and so forth. And so what I would emphasize is there's this major wildlife spectacle that's going on around us, over our head, in a great many nights of the year. We just can't see it. If we could hear better, maybe we could hear it as well. But it's just amazing. It's going on every night. At this time of the year, almost every night, except when there's odd weather and the birds decide not to fly that night. Last night, 2.5 million birds went over Wake County, headed south. Just Wake County.
Wake County.
Each of our adjacent counties probably also had a similar number go over them. So it can be very exciting just to have a look.
That is crazy. Nature really is amazing. And like you said, even if we can't see what's going on, it's happening and it's out there, and it's really, really cool.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. That's true.
Thanks so much, Philip, for taking some time and chatting with us. And thanks for joining.
All right. Thank you.
That was Philip Dorr, and he providing us a wealth of information. And that birdcast that he is talking about, that is this graphic right here. So you can see the high amount of migrating birds on the East Coast as winter is coming. And that's going to do it for the first half of On the Radar. We're going to go to break real quick, but when we return, we'll introduce you to the newest meteorologist of the CBS 17 Storm Team. We'll have that when we return.
On the Radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
And as promised, we're still going to take a look back at Hurricane Hazel, which didn't happen all that long ago, back in the 1950s. It wrecked the Cape Fear region, which once again points to any storm making landfall in Cape Fear or around the Wilmington area that moves off to that northerly track, eventually impacting central North Carolina as well. So picking up on things that happened in the past and how we can learn from those events and be prepared for future events as we move forward. As we are still in tropical season, as proven by Hurricane Hazel way back in 1954, a late season hurricane to make landfall in the Cape Fear region. And it's still possible you can have a hurricane system all the way through the end of November, as that is the end of hurricane season. So we'll talk more about that. But first, let's introduce you to the newest storm team member. And for that, we have Chief Meteorologist Wes Hohenstein working on that for us in the main studio. So I'm going to give it over to Wes.
All right, from the digital studio down the hall to our main studio here at CBS 17, Wes Hohenstein with the newest member of the CBS 17 weather team, Matthew Huddleston, is now in charge of our weekend morning weathercasts, among many other things. Matthew, you have lived in North Carolina your entire life, which is rare for the TV business. Usually you have to move around, but you've been lucky enough to stay right here at home. Kind of tell us where you grew up and what brought you in the doors here to CBS 17.
Yeah, I grew up about 30 minutes south of here, which is where I live now, too. The first market I was in was Wilmington, North Carolina, about 2 hours down I-40. Worked there the past 5 years, and now happy to be back here in Raleigh.
Yeah, you lived in Johnston County most of your life.
Exactly.
Took a detour to the beach, and now you're back in Johnston County. You went to NC State, Clayton High School, right?
Yeah, all sorts of North Carolina stuff, yeah.
So how is it, I don't have this experience personally because I grew up in the Midwest, but have been here for a really long time. You grew up in the same place that you're now forecasting for on TV. How has that been?
It's crazy because all the places that I've been to, I'm talking about now, forecasting for communities that I went to high school in, early school, families here, a lot of friends here. It's just nice to be back in this area.
And what about the beach? Most of us dream about living, maybe working in the beach. How was that experience? A little different than living here in central North Carolina.
Yeah, here you're probably about 2 hours away at any given point from the coast, but down there it was nice to be so close to the beaches. I tried to get there as often as I could. Not likely as much anymore now, but still it's not too far. It's a nice day trip, a long weekend, and I'll still be back from time to time.
Yeah, so a lot of people work at the beach or they work in the mountains. They work at a destination. They never get to enjoy it. Do you have regrets you didn't go enough, or do you feel like you were at the beach enough?
It's one of those things, like if you live near Disney World, you're not going to go every single day. So even living at the beach, I didn't go every day, but probably should have gone more often. But I'll have to get back at some point soon.
Yeah, you can 2 hours have your feet in the sand. That's one of the great things about living in central North Carolina. But they don't get stuff like this at the beach.
Often.
We're going to go do a walk down memory lane with you. So this is in Johnston County. We did some research. This is you. You said you're about 7 or 8?
About 7 or 8 probably. We had the big snowstorm, of course, back in 2000. That wasn't this one, but about 10 inches, I think we estimated here. So a decent snowstorm nonetheless.
Yeah, so you're like up to your waist.
Yeah, pretty much. This is my first house back in the early 2000s, and it was a deep snow for me at the time. Probably not, up to my knees now, but back then that was something else.
I mean, listen, if it's 10 inches, so we think this is the January 2002 snow. It was January 2nd and 3rd in 2002. Both days totaled 10 inches, which we haven't seen anything like that in a long time. So this is, number one, a cute picture of you. I expect this to be on social media, but just quite a historic moment for our weather here in central North Carolina, 10 inches of snow.
Yeah, it seems like anytime we get snow, that kind of recycles once again. It gets posted on social media, and I have to do it this time. It's somewhere out there,
It's saved in our system now, so we can post it. But you're not moving here alone. Tell me, with the exception of the snowman, tell me who you're back here in town with.
Yeah, I don't want to block it here, but this is my beautiful wife, Rebecca, our dog, Luna, down there. This was this past January. We got about 3-4 inches of snow, a rare event down there in the Wilmington area. Made a little snowman, snow woman. And it was kind of fun. Hopefully we see that more of that here.
Well, what do you like? We get it all here, as everyone knows. What do you think you're best at? What do you dislike? What do you like personally to live through? Because that's our job every day.
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
When I was younger, I liked the cold and the snow. Not as much anymore. I like not the humidity, but still the warmer temperature. So I like fall and spring, not as much winter and summer. But obviously, I like it all.
Yeah, I think everyone shares that because as you get older, things hurt more when it's colder outside.
Yeah.
So welcome to that club.
You know when a storm's coming because your joints start to ache a bit.
Right, there's science and there's some other stuff. And finally, let's finish with this. An interesting picture because this was a road during Hurricane Isaias, one of the hardest named storms to ever pronounce it a few years ago.
Took us a while.
You were covering this while working in Wilmington. Kind of tell us what we're looking at here.
Yeah, this is not snow. This is actually sand on the roadway here in Oak Island, about a foot or so of overwash thanks to the storm surge down there. Thankfully, things are back to normal down in that part of the Brunswick County area. But yeah, the governor was down there and lots of very important cleanup in the days after that.
Yeah, that was a wild storm. And I can't, that's...
Yeah.
And these people have... a washer and dryer.
Yeah, it was so bad to see all the people's lives out there on the streets, but they made a quick recovery and things have been good ever since, thankfully.
Okay. Well, again, Matthew is going to be primarily on our weekend morning newscasts as well as sprinkled throughout the rest of the week. Matthew, tell us how we can find you on social media.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much every single social media. I'm at Matthew HWX or Matthew H Weather, and I try to post as often as I can.
Yeah, and it's Matthew Huddleston, just like Johnston County. Huddleston from Johnston.
Don't leave the T out.
That is Matthew. Look for him weekend mornings right here on CBS 17.
And of course, if you've watched the last couple of weekends, you would have already seen Matthew, but welcome Matthew as well. So 2 new Storm team members, myself and Matthew. Hopefully we are nice and settled for a while here on the Storm team. And we're talking about Hurricane Hazel, but first, let's also talk about the fall conditions out there because we're starting to see the leaves change, not just in the higher elevations, but also across the rest of the area. Patchy colors starting to show up here in central North Carolina as well as the Piedmont, and as you move into the foothills, starting to see partial color getting closer to peak. In the higher elevations, you're near peak or past peak. As you start to work down below about 2,000 feet, it's still getting closer to peak, so the colors are really starting to show up as we go into this weekend, and then going into the following week, we'll probably be at peak about 2,000 feet down to 1,000 feet. And as we work closer to our elevation, which is 400 to about 700 feet, that's where we'll start to see that color show up as we get toward the last week of October. We'll really see it bloom. And the first week of November is probably when we'll get peak season here. Hopefully not a whole lot of wind between now and then. Speaking of wind, how about a look back on Hurricane Hazel? And again, this made landfall in the Cape Fear area on October 13th. Back in 1954, and it was quite devastating. It was one of the last majors to make landfall in North Carolina, right there on the border between South Carolina and North Carolina. And again, it points back to storms making landfall in those areas and then how they eventually impact central North Carolina here, as it made landfall at a Category 4. That's 130 mile per hour winds. You had gusts as high as 90 miles per hour at RDU, and how about 120 at Goldsboro? So another storm that produced 100 mile per hour plus wind gusts well inland. You go back to Fran, also doing that as well. 19 deaths, unfortunately, 136 million way back in 1954. So that'd probably be a couple of $1 billion in damage with the adjustment for inflation. How about 15 feet of storm surge? It also happened during high tide. That's unfortunate whenever you have storm surge coming in when high tide is happening as well. That kind of compounds that water and inundation. So unfortunately doing that, as well as that storm surge, we always say you hide from wind, which means you just hunker down and wait for the wind to die down. You can do that in any shelter anywhere, really, as long as it's a well-built shelter, but you run from water because storm surge, it just decimates everything. Even if it's a well-built shelter, water is going to find a way in, and unfortunately you always run from water. And this is why, because coastal areas always are heavily impacted and the worst impacted by storm systems, especially hurricanes, whenever they are bringing in big time storm surge. So a look back on Hurricane Hazel there. And of course, it is fair time. So some odd fair traditions. This coming from the state of Georgia, where they have the Banana Derby. I'm not sure they're quite still doing this. Last time I looked it up, it looked like they may have stopped doing this in 2021. But this is monkeys Yeah, that's monkeys with jockeying on top of dogs that race around. So I'm not sure that that's still a thing anymore, but I did find it interesting. Maybe a little bit more culturally accepted nowadays, the llama rama in the Minnesota State Fair. They dress up llamas and they race them around. They don't ride anything on the llamas, just dressed up llamas racing around. And if you wondered what the largest cabbage ever grown was, and you wondered what state that was from, well, you're getting ready to find out. It was the state of Alaska. And if you're wondering where the state of Alaska fair is located, that's Palmer, just north of Anchorage. Grew a 138-pound cabbage seen here. It looks like something straight out of Jurassic Park. That's just wild to me. Alaska also did some kind of feat because it had 41% of the state's population go to the state fair in 2015. Now, the largest turnout for state fairs across the nation comes from Texas. They've had 2.1 million come to and attend the state fair there. And of course, there's also all kinds of other interesting things that come from fairs across the country. York, Pennsylvania had the first ever fair in the United States before the United States was a thing. Back in 1754 held the first fair. Now, back then, it was probably just a trade of cattle as well as a gathering of churches, because the word fair actually comes from the Latin term, and that Latin term is fera, meaning holy day. So it used to be a gathering for churches and an exchange of goods and cattle, and that's where we get the term fair from. But there's also some other really cool things that we can thank fairs for, cotton candy being one of those. It was invented for a fair called Fairy Floss way back in the day, and that happened in 1897. So if you're wondering how old cotton candy is, it's just a string of heated sugar. That comes back from 1897. And the corn dog was also invented for a fair, and that happened in the Texas State Fair back in 1942. So the fair's bringing some awesome traditions, some fried sugary foods as well. If you have the opportunity to make it out to the North Carolina State Fair, I would highly suggest it because it is something that is very cool and fun to do. But that's going to do it for this week's version of On the Radar. Make sure to check back any episodes you may have missed. You can catch that on the Roku app. That's the Roku, the CBS 17 Plus app on Roku. You can also check out any version of On the Radar on YouTube at the CBS 17 YouTube channel, as well as CBS17.com, where all of the On the Radars can be found, the past and the present versions of On the Radar. So until next week, where we will be talking about fall severe setups, and hopefully we're talking about, as we get a little bit closer to the winter season, maybe some of these fall severe setups transitioning into winter weather setups as we go into the winter season. And we'll look at some fair weather back in the day, as next week will be week 2 of the North Carolina State Fair. So until then, that's going to do it.
On the Radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.